I really thought these videos would be a lot easier to do than they are. It seems like I get done with several minutes of my thoughts and then I end up hitting the done button and restarting because I simply can't measure up to what I really want to say. The words just don't come out. For many, many years they came out quite fluidly, but I don't know, maybe it's that I'm getting up there in age. I'm going to be 60 and you say, yeah, 60, that's young. Well, I guess to some people it is and to others it isn't. I'm not going to get into my health challenges right now or my life because I want to talk about secrecy and how secrecy affects one's inner being. I'd like you guys to post and gals, excuse me, post comments down below and answer some questions for me. It'll kind of be like a quiz, kind of like a college paper, a study, the truth, done in an honest and open way. There's two different types of people that were born through donor insemination. Those that, like I said, were never told until a later age, where they were told under adverse circumstances, which were the majority of the donor inseminated offspring, the DI children, whatever you want to call them. They had no clue, or they had a clue, and they just couldn't figure it out because they simply had been deceived into thinking that their dad was their dad and their mom and their dad was their mom and their dad, and their family was all good and tidy and neat, just like the 50s family. Donor insemination, I was shocked, had been going on since the late 1800s when they discovered that they could make a better cow by picking out better semen and creating something really special. I'll never forget when I learned that word, artificial insemination. As I mentioned in my last video, I went to the library and went through the card file, the computerized card file, and it said, see animal breeding. You can imagine how that would make one feel. Well, I had an opportunity to meet my biological father, and unfortunately the secrecy destroyed any possibilities of that ever happening, because he was assured when he masturbated into that little cup and the semen was taken in a syringe and inserted into my mother in early September 1954 that it would be a secret. So those four people that day set out on this course of deception that ultimately led to my conception. Deception and conception. A neat little tidy package that no one needed to ever know about. Except me. And I watched as the secret destroyed my parents, like many of you. It's hard enough for two people to stay married, especially in the year 2014, let alone the 50s and 60s, although back then it was more like, did you hear about Johnny's parents? They got a divorce. Oh my God, poor Johnny, what's he to do? And there was a definite stigma with broken families. Now they're accepted. Now you don't even need a mommy and a daddy. You can be conceived in a lab. But my question to you is there anybody out there that was conceived in secrecy that had a positive experience from it? There was this preconceived notion back during the day of the 40s and the 50s and the 60s and perhaps even the 70s and in the 80s that creating a well-bred human being and not letting them know the true origins of their being would really have no effect on the person. My question is, when you conceive a highly gifted human being, they have a natural curiosity to want to know their roots, to know their heritage. Families used to be important. Brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers, and now the family unit has gone by the wayside. But being a DI child and finding out the truth, how did that make you feel? It almost ruined my life. On one hand, it was a relief to know that I wouldn't inherit all of the negative traits that ran on my father's side of the family. But on the other hand, it set me out on a journey to find out who that man was, because I immediately asked my mother who was the donor, and she said, "I'm sorry, Greg, you'll never be able to know." And that feeling of emptiness and loneliness that started at that very moment, even though I found my siblings and I found my birth father, still haunts me today. I always wanted to have a relationship with a man, especially after I had found out so much about him. He died in 2004, and actually I found more out about him since that time than I did before he died, thanks to this wonderful little computer box we have here called the Internet. He was a really great man, but I don't know why he would have taught at a major university and started out thousands and thousands of people on successful careers, but yet didn't want to have anything to do with me, even going as far as writing letters through his attorney telling me that he had no desire or interest in being a part of my life or my discovery phase of who I was and who I am. And to this day, I still have this haunting, and maybe that's why I dropped out of the news group and Donor's Offspring. At one time, I was the unofficial president, way back when, 1983. Candace Turner, God bless her soul, wherever she is, was actually the founder of this movement. She was one of the first people that found out the truth about her conception and had to work through it and went public with it. I'm sure there's many faceless people out there that are now 9 feet under that have went through much worse events than we have. But God bless Candace Turner. She helped me immensely. And God bless Bill Cordray. He was like the number 2 person, and then between Bill and Candace, he says, "Do you know Candace?" And I didn't know Candace, but I got to know her real quick. And I got to know Bill very well. Bill, Candace, and Greg, the 3 core members of Donor Offspring way back in 30 years ago, 25, 30 years ago. And now how things have changed. But I'm still searching for someone that can say, "Oh, the secrecy was great. The deception was great. I learned so much from being conceived in this shroud of clinical BS." I always like when I was telling my story and I'd get a few insensitive people, which yes, they do exist probably more today than ever before, but they would say, "Well, you should just be happy you're alive." I always liked that. That was crazy. But when I started my journey with donor insemination, I wanted to change the world. I wanted to change the sperm banking rules. I thought people cared. I thought it was a big mistake. I mean, didn't the medical community have like the Hippocratic Oath that they were supposed to adhere to truth and justice in the American way? I thought they made a mistake. I thought, man, I was really something totally different because I was like one out of a few that even knew. And how many were there? I thought it was only done back when I found out a few times. Now it's done quite prevalently. You can go to the center of germinal choice and pick out the IQ level, pick out the characteristics, the genes, the eye color, and if you don't like what you get, you can either abort it or give it away once you have it. It's a throwaway society. Well, here we go. Secrecy. Secrecy in sociology and zoology. Government secrecy. Corporate secrecy. Technology secrecy. Military secrecy. And then we have views on secrecy. Excessive secrecy is often cited as a source of much human conflict. One may have to lie, be deceitful, in order to hold a secret, which might lead to psychological repercussions. The alternative, declining to answer when something asked, may suggest the answer and may therefore not always be suitable for keeping a secret. It's called the sin of omission. Also, the other may insist that one answer the question. Oh well. Give some interesting food for thought, and then we get into deceit. Deceit is a propagation of beliefs that are not true. Children of deceit. Well, I'll close this out by saying, yes, I'm happy that I'm alive, and I feel it unfortunate, the situation that had to be involved, or how I was involved to become who I am today. And I look back and I see the carnage that it created in my family. It's really, I look at donor insemination as a form of human psychological, physiological engineering, creating a better society while giving people what they want. Let's just make this place a better world through artificial insemination. And it doesn't really matter what the offspring themselves think, because they're the end result and we deal with the beginning result. Well, so back to my question to you. How does it feel to be a child born through artificial insemination and now be an adult? Especially if you had to go through the deceivement part. Now, I'm going to ask the second group of us donor offspring that knew the truth from the very get-go, and then it creates two other classes, those classes that actually had successful reunions with their birth father and birth siblings, which I think was probably a pretty cool thing. And then there was the other half of those that simply found out the truth and were unable to pursue a successful reunion with the father, birth father, and the birth siblings. Of course, now using 23andMe, you can go back and you have another avenue to search from. And you have the internet to search from, and a couple other websites that are donated, that were created for that purpose, to facilitate reunions. Reunions are usually always positive, sometimes not. But what's your thoughts? Children of deceit, secrecy. How does that make you feel? I know that it made me feel rather different, to say the least. So anyway, I appreciate your comments. I appreciate you watching these difficult videos for me to make. I never thought that they would be this difficult to rehash things that happened 60 years ago. I thought I'd put them away, buried them deep down inside of me, never to come out again. But they're still there, and they always will be.